the thing that interests me most that I know that you've done or do for clients is the idea of having a corpus of information that can be tapped into, gathered, processed, ideated, prompted, whatever. But having that information is a big part of, being able to contribute to what would be a broader, more refined message, blog, whatever it is. So that's part of the reason why I've been a bit lax in doing this stuff too, because I know that you can have episode one transcript of a podcast that could go for the next 5 years and create 10 pieces of content as a result of that one episode, but that invariably ends up being a lie or inaccurate or changed because something changes with the podcast production, or you add more information that would refine what you would have otherwise ejected from an AI-based solution. So if it's at all possible for us to create that corpus as a result of what I do for rethinking podcasting, I'd be very interested to explore that.
And I was just about to go into that with the newsletter, but also with the blog. With what we've built for ourselves, when we're writing the blog, not we, when AI is writing the blog, we've built a database or central repository of all of the transcripts we've created. Once we start writing blogs, those will get added to it. Basically, any content we create is going to go into this knowledge base. I mean, not everything. Anything that's 100% just repurposed from one of our larger forms of content, like social media posts, that's not going to go in there. That would be more in a spreadsheet somewhere that we can access. But for the knowledge base, we're putting all of our long form content. We can also put in any articles or videos we see that we think this has really good information, or it's a research project that has a lot of relevant statistics. We can add that in so that when we're writing the blog, it can do searches trying to find information from our previous content. So it can reference previous episodes if there's a relevant episode to refer people to. And that really comes in handy when you're talking about a newsletter, or even your idea of some of the mid-form videos where you're taking transcripts from, or taking clips from multiple different episodes. You could give it an idea, and that's the nice thing about this knowledge base.
And I love that. Like the idea of just slowly building and building on a collection of information that it continues to use to inform the kinds of things that it gives you. That's really interesting.
So it's basically what I see a number of podcasters, they'll take the transcript one way or another to turn it into a single blog post. This is that idea on steroids, because instead of just creating content from like a one-to-one thing, this episode created this content. Now we can create completely new stuff from our entire catalog, our vault of everything we've created. So that can go into not just newsletters, but articles. It can generate new ideas based on things we've talked about in part on an episode, but might be a topic that's worthy of its own episode or its own video. So it can be used for all kinds of stuff. And like I said, you can tie into it with like ChatGPT or anything else and chat with it and tell it, I'm writing a LinkedIn post. Find quotes where I talk about this topic. I mean, anything to help shorten the time you spend on something, but being able to turn the knowledge base into basically a giant brain of everything you've done.
It's really cool.
And I'm sure there's a lot of other ways it can be used that I haven't thought of yet, or at the moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're learning and growing, and you'll be able to grow big data brains as time goes on, and you get to do more of them. But something that I see often with automation workflows that involve AI is that sometimes, perhaps more often than not, the person doesn't just stick to one. That Perplexity and Claude and ChatGPT and maybe, I think it's Llama, that's Meta's one, and you've got Gemini. Some automation workflows of information will pass through multiple LLMs at the same time. Would you see a benefit in creating content based on your experience by doing something like that? Like, just colloquially off the top of my head, I understand ChatGPT to be very good at processing information, but perhaps not being as personable and human as Claude. So perhaps the information repository goes through ChatGPT for ideation for a blog, and then the writing is in its first draft from ChatGPT and then gets sent to Claude, where it has a grammar pass, a human pass, human AI pass, whatever, and makes it a bit more personable than it would be out of ChatGPT. Have you got experience in circumstances like that? And have you seen where that can be valuable? Ignoring the automatic use case that most people would use is Perplexity, being a research-based tool predominantly. Having it run through Perplexity for fact-checking and then going to another LLM to be constructed into content would be one way to go about it.
Perplexity is its own kind of unique use case because it is very much designed for research. Stuff like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, the others, the LLMs, they're more or less built for general use. So in most cases, I don't see a benefit in trying to use one because it's better at this unless it is really heads and shoulders above the others in what it does. So for Claude, it tends to be a better writer out of the box in that it sounds less AI. But if you provide really good prompting, you can get really good results out of any of them. The big downside to using Claude is it's really expensive compared to the others. And the other kind of factor that goes into that is ChatGPT might be the king right now because they just put out 5. But next week, Google might put out a new version of Gemini, which leapfrogs them. So trying to constantly adjust based on what's best at that moment in time is just going to be a lot of extra work to keep up on all of that stuff. So when I work with clients, my recommendation is it really depends on your budget and what you're hoping to get out of it. If you've got the budget and you can afford Claude for your writing, yeah, go for it. But if you want to keep your costs down, maybe something like Gemini is going to be a better fit, because I haven't looked into the pricing of GPT-5, but I know before that, Gemini tended to be a little bit cheaper. I think that was the case. But they're both significantly cheaper than Claude. So I think cost is a bigger factor than trying to find the best for any given use case, because like I said, best is probably going to change quite a bit given the week or the month we're talking about. So does that answer your question?
Definitely. And it points out the important part too, that the more LLMs you're chaining together, the more points of failure you have as part of that process as well. Whereas if you're investing everything with one, with adequate prompting to get what you need, then that's one LLM. And if it changes, you can adapt to another LLM instead of Claude getting infinitely more expensive and then all of a sudden Gemini's compute gets way too expensive. So if you've got a Claude subscription and then funnel it through Gemini to then go to ChatGPT, one week you might pay like $200 a month, and then the next week you're paying like $1,500 a month because the compute ramped up so much. So yeah, that totally makes sense to me.
But if you're spending that much on anything, something's not right. Because when you're automating, well, you mentioned a couple things that I wanted to touch on. Mixing and matching LLMs in an automation, that's fine. It's not really going to cause any new types of problems that wouldn't be there if you were using the same LLM for each step. Each step of the automation is where you could potentially have an error. In my experience, most of the issues that are kind of intermittent tend to all stem from the LLMs and the way they output their data. So there's always going to be some oversight involved because the automation might not run every single time because maybe Gemini decided, today I'm going to output the data a little bit differently. So that breaks the next step because it's expecting things a certain way. So automations, they don't run 100% perfectly, especially if you start building them to be more complex. So there is always some oversight there. But the other thing is the price, because doing this type of work, it's not covered by your monthly subscription. You're paying their API rates, where you pay per million tokens, basically. Something like a blog shouldn't cost more than like 15, 20 cents. And that's if you're doing something really complicated and you're using a ton of, like you're using a 2-hour transcript and you're using the full transcript. There's things you can do to reduce your token usage so things are cheaper. So 20 cents is like completely unoptimized. You're not compromising on anything. Here's the full transcript because I want the LLM to go through every single thing that was said. And then we're going to send that into creating an outline and then doing the research and all of the different steps and creating something really high impact. And that's where you put different guardrails in. Maybe with the costs and budget, we only want to write 2 blogs per episode max. So we put that guardrail in. So it's not just ramping up your spend. Hey, I decided to write 15 articles for you today. Surprise. And then write 15 articles the next time. There's a lot of things we can do to control costs, but the big thing is it tends to be significantly cheaper than using the fancy SaaS products like Castmagic or any of the others that do like transcript to other types of written content, because they're doing the same thing. They're just selling it to you as a product, and they have to make sure they're making their profit, covering their costs of hosting and babysitting everything, all of that stuff. So when you build the automations yourself, you're paying less. I mean, Castmagic's what, $20 a month? Something around there. For $20, you could probably run all of these automations for a few months. And there's no limitation to the number of hours you can upload like you get with Castmagic.
There you go. That's pretty cool. But the trade-off there is that you're using the API to structure an automation yourself, whereas with Castmagic, you're paying extra money with more limitations, but offsetting the requirements for your knowledge to be able to utilize the LLM.
Yeah, you lose out on so much because you can't customize it to the same degree. You can't give it a huge set of instructions of, this is language I don't want you to use. Go check my knowledge base and learn my voice. Learn how I write. Learn how I construct stuff. Again, that's where that knowledge base really comes in, because it can be used to create profiles that you can use in other LLMs. Like if you wanted to use ChatGPT, because that's your main LLM, that's what you have a subscription to, you can put that in as custom instructions on how to write like you. It's never going to write 100% like you, but it's going to understand the little nuances of how you communicate. So it might sound like you to the average person, but when you're reading it, you're going to go, this isn't what I would have written or how I would have phrased that, but it still sounds like you, if that makes sense. But there's just so much customization you lose out on when you go with a SaaS like that, because they have to make it something that's going to work for everybody and all use cases. So just by definition, it's going to be more generic. And I see that. I know I call out Cast Magic, but you're going to get the same things with Descript, their Underlord, with Riverside's, what's their co-creator. They all give the same generic outputs. And you can fight it all you want, you can give it instructions, but they're set up in a way that they're going to do basically what they want to do either way.
Yeah. Yeah. And that ease and simplicity bubble is going to burst at some point. I think there's going to be a time where the people that have taken the time to learn the automations, to understand how it works, and not just invest in a SaaS to do all the work for them so they don't have to think about it. There's going to be a time where the automation people are going to be at a distinct advantage compared to the others who have been in UI platforms the entire time and had the work done for a blank check, you know?
I think we're going to see a time where we see a lot of SaaSes go away, because we'll be able to create customized things that work for us and what we need, as opposed to looking for a SaaS that kind of works for our use case, but isn't quite right for how we think, how we work, how we operate. And I mean, some stuff is always going to remain. Something like Riverside and Descript. They're going to be there for a while, because what they've built, it's more than just a text-based SaaS. They're providing a service that requires a server and all of these other elements to be able to record locally. That's going to be tougher to replace. But something like Cast Magic, I have to assume there's a reason why they were on AppSumo recently with lifetime deals. If your company is doing well, you're not going to go on to AppSumo. You go there if you're just starting out or you're needing to try to infuse some cash into the company. My guess is a lot of people have started using Descript's Underlord, ChatGPT to do the same things Cast Magic offers. And now Riverside's added their Copilot. We're seeing this functionality rolled into services people are already using. So Riverside, Descript, they're going to put those companies offering this once niche product, creating show notes and written content from your episodes. People are basically already using Descript and Riverside for recording their content. You add this functionality in, why pay another $20 to Cast Magic? And I think Opus Clip is one that's going to not get put out of business by like Riverside and Descript, simply because so many YouTubers probably aren't using Riverside and Descript for creating their content. So there's always going to be a need for something like Opus. But a lot of the other stuff, like I've seen a lot of like motion just showed up on my radar about 6 months ago. That's supposed to be an AI powered project management system for you. I think maybe that's not the right term, but basically you give it the tasks you've got on your plate, your calendar, and it'll automatically schedule stuff for you based on the time you have available each day. We're getting to the point where we're seeing tools that are going to work better for us, but I think we're going to start seeing the ability for us to create our own simple tools that work best for ourselves.